Lekshe Tsomo is a professor of Buddhist Studies at the University of San Diego, where she teaches world religions, Buddhist thought and culture, death and afterlife, and other subjects. She holds a doctorate in Comparative Philosophy from University of Hawai, specializing in comparative religion, Buddhist feminist philosophy, Buddhism and bioethics, Buddhist social theory, concepts of death and afterlife, and Buddhist transnationalism. She is the author of Into the Jaws of Yama, Buddhism, Bioethics and Death, and the editor of numerous books on women and Buddhism. And today, Venerable is going to speak on Buddhism, bioethics and death. So we look forward to your lecture, and we hope you will not take another decade to come back. Thank you.
Very happy to be here this evening. Thanks for coming out in the cold. Maybe we can start with a short prayer of generating a pure motivation. Whenever we listen to Buddhist teachings, we try to check our motivation. Why are we here? And so of course we'll try to generate the highest motivation. Okay? So, Sangye Chidam Sukhi Shalama Sanju Varudani Kapsuchi Tahagi Jinsogi Pesanamki Dola Kanchil Sangye Duhasho Sangye Chidam Sukhi Shalama Chanchu Varudani Kapsuchi Sangye Jinsogi Pesanamki Dola Kanchil Sangye Duhasho Sangye Chidam Sukhi Shalama Chanchu Varudani Kapsuchi Sangye Jinsogi Pesanamki Dola Kanchil Sangye Duhasho. Feel for refuge to the awakened ones, to their teachings, and to the spiritual community. By virtue of the practice of the perfections, such as generosity, may we achieve the state of perfect awakening in order to liberate all living beings from suffering. So I want to congratulate you all for coming out to discuss the cheery topic of death. Most people don't want to think about death. In fact, we avoid it if at all possible. Of course, intellectually, we know that eventually we're all going to die. But we hope that we can put it off for as long as possible. And when it comes, we hope it will be peaceful and quick. Unfortunately, death doesn't always work that way, right? Now, the Buddha was very realistic in thinking about the topic of death. He made it actually a central feature of his teaching. He talked about death and impermanence, and noted that in fact we're dying all the time. So from the time that we were born, our aggregates, all of the molecules and atoms of our body have been arising and perishing continuously. So that's why we have to take a bath eventually, right? Because all of our cells are dying, right? And so when we meditate also, we get in touch with the impermanent nature of our body and our mind. Now, if we do this, if we meditate on death and impermanence, then we get used to the topic, get used to the reality of death. And then when the moment of death comes, it's not such a shock because we're prepared. The Tibetans say that if we don't meditate on death in the morning, we waste the day. If we don't meditate on death in the evening, we waste the night. So the Tibetans are really keen on making the most of every moment. If you hang out with Tibetan practitioners, you find that they concentrate all of their energy on their practice. And they try not to waste any time at all with frivolous things, even sometimes to the extreme of not doing physical exercise. But they really see that because we're disintegrating moment by moment, we have no time to waste. It's very foolish to waste our time with silly stuff, because what use will it be at the moment of death? We accumulate stuff, much too much stuff. But then, when the time of death comes, that can actually be an obstacle, because we're attached to our stuff. We don't want to let go of it. And that can be a real problem in making a smooth transition to the next lifetime. Of course, attachment to our loved ones is also another source of attachment and suffering at the moment of death. So the Buddha also taught methods of recognizing attachment when it arises and dealing with it. And here we have to distinguish carefully between love and attachment. People say, oh, then the Buddhists don't have love. They don't love anyone. No, the Buddhists love everyone. But there's a big difference between love and attachment. Okay, so they call it loving kindness for all living beings, which is a very different word in Sanskrit and Tibetan from attachment. I want to distinguish between love, where the heart opens, and attachment, where the heart closes. It wants to possess. It wants to keep things for ourselves. It's two very, very different things. You think about it. So now first I'd like to ask you to join me for a few minutes of meditation on recognizing impermanence. We talk about impermanence, but what is it? No? Let's take a few moments to reflect on the impermanent nature of our own body. Sorry. Okay, so please sit comfortably. If you're sitting on a cushion, you can sit cross-legged, just comfortably. If you're sitting in a chair, place your feet flat on the floor and sit up as straight as possible. If the spine is straight, then the nerves are straight. If the nerves are straight, then the mind is straight. We can place our hands in our lap, generally right over left, with the thumbs touching, which creates a sort of circular energy. But if you prefer to put your hands in another position, that's fine too. The main thing is to sit up straight and tall. Try tucking your chin just a bit. It helps to straighten the spine. The mouth is shut. We try to breathe through our nose, unless we have a cold. Keep the eyes gently shut, but not completely. If the eyes are wide open, we might get distracted. If they're tightly shut, we might fall asleep. So just leave them slightly open so you're aware of the present moment. And then relax the body completely. You can do a body scan starting at the top of the head and checking, starting with the forehead, cheeks, and nose and mouth and neck, shoulders. Often we stash tension in our shoulders. Then moving down the chest, the waist, the stomach, the abdomen area. Often we tend to get tense. So wherever you notice tension, consciously relax that tension. And continue on down the legs, the knees, the calves, the feet, toes. And do a couple more sweeps to make sure your body is completely relaxed. Now starting again from the top of the head, start to notice the sensations of the body. Any tingling or itching, sensations of warmth or cold. Any tightness or discomfort. Pleasant sensations, unpleasant sensations. Notice how things are changing. Sweeping a few more times. Get in touch with the impermanent nature of your body, both internally and externally. Notice how sensations arise, and then they dissolve. So, all of these things, sort of like taking obstacles as opportunities. When we think about it, oh, it's a disaster. We have a public talk, the video's rolling, I have a coughing attack. And yet, it's a perfect reminder that life is impermanent. All of our expectations, you see, it's very good, very good. Now we all have the expectation that we're going to live a nice long life. And truly, today, life expectancy has increased quite a bit. In the United States now, I think it's 82 for women, 81 for men. Japan still has the longest life expectancy. But there's no guarantee, you see. Anything can happen anytime. So a lot of human beings, even though the average lifespan in the present era might be 60, 70, 80 years old, but a lot of children die when they're very young. Some die even in the womb. A lot of young people die from various illnesses. People in the prime of life can also pass away. Perhaps we've had the experience of coming into work one day. Oh, where's Miriam? Oh, didn't you hear? Hear what? She passed away. But I saw her Friday. She was fine. Yeah, Friday she was fine, but then she had a brain aneurysm. She's gone. Oh. And it happens more and more as you get older. And this is one of the sufferings of old age, is that as you get older, people pass away more and more frequently. My mother used to say, the worst thing about getting old is that everybody dies on you. Yeah, it's true. So, we slide away for 50, 60, 70 years, and then we die. What's it all about? So, the Buddha taught us to make life meaningful, to make every moment of every day meaningful. What did he mean by that? Well, it means precisely because life is short and impermanent, then we have to make the most of it. And that means not to fritter away our time worrying about our appearance or our possessions or even our worldly sorts of pursuits. Now these days, worldly pursuits have reached a new height. With social media, people are completely consumed with what they're going to buy next, what they're going to eat next, where they're going to go next, right? And it's become totally, almost psychopathic, addiction to the social media. My students in San Diego get so nervous, even having to sit for 50 minutes without checking their phones. They're consumed by having to constantly check their email and check the internet. And a lot of it's about what they're going to do, constant grasping after what they're going to do, what they're going to buy, where they're going to go, new attractions, right? The restaurants in the United States are having a terrible time. It used to be that people would come in and finish their meal and leave in an hour. No longer. The people come in, they have to take a selfie with the food. Yeah. So, and then they want everybody in the picture, after they take a portrait of their meal to post on their Facebook page. Then they have to have a selfie with the whole group. So then they get the waiter, the server, to take photos of them, and it takes 2 hours to get out of the restaurant. So the restaurant owners are really having a difficult time because they're not able to move the customers through as quickly as before. That's just one small example. And the other thing is the debate about stuff. The Japanese woman who wrote the book Stuff. Right? People have so much stuff, they don't know what to do with it. Their closets are filled, their garages are filled. They have to buy big boxes from container stores that specialize in selling containers so that you can store more stuff. Then, eventually, the house becomes too small, so you have to buy a bigger house in order to have space for your stuff. Well, the requirements in the kitchen, and they're happy with that. It's great. Once I was in Sri Lanka and driving to the airport, and I asked the driver, how's life? He said, oh, life is good. I said, how many hours a day do you have to drive to, make a living? He said, oh, I just drive until I have enough for that day, and then I go home and play with my kids and go to the temple. Wow, what wisdom, huh? Whereas often we get consumed with more, and then we have to work harder, and then we get more stressed. So when we say make life meaningful, it would be the opposite of this. It would be taking time to look inside, how to create a peaceful heart instead of a heart that's always grasping after more. Also, from a Buddhist perspective, it's about a meaningful life is one that not only takes care of this short lifespan, but prepares for the future. This life is very short and unpredictable. Future lives are many, right, until we figure out how to get liberated from it all. So making a life meaningful means spending every moment with awareness. Even if we work, and we all have to work, right? And we all have to do housework, I hope everybody's helping with housework. And then, right, but we still have lots of time in our day. How do we spend them? This is the question. This is the challenge of the modern era. When the corporate capitalism wants to make sure that we buy. And it's a setup, right? So this is the basic Buddhist perspective on death and impermanence and how to make life meaningful. Now, why do we fear death? Any suggestions? Why do people get unhappy when they get a terminal diagnosis? Attachment to
people,
to ourselves,
to family,
to
friends.
Oh, to family, yes, right. What else?
Plus the unknown, you don't know what's going to happen after that.
Yes, facing the unknown, the uncertainty of death. Yeah. What else? Belongings, attachment to possessions. Yeah, we work so hard for all that stuff, and now, gee, we're going to have to let go of it. What else?
You wonder about your future rebirth.
Worrying about the future. Yeah, good one.
We won't be able to do physically the things that we can do, like when we're not ill.
Right, and that we're slowing down and we won't be able to do the things that we can do at present. Good. Yeah.
A regret of living an incomplete life.
Regret about having lived an incomplete life. Very good. Yeah, excellent. Fear of pain, perhaps. Yeah. Disappointment. We didn't get to do everything on our bucket list. You know, bucket list? It's an American thing. They say, they've got their list of things they want to do before they kick the bucket. It's a euphemism for dying. So they make a list, hang gliding or parachuting or I don't know, whatever. They have all these ideas about what they want to do before they kick it. Concern about the future life is what the Buddhists would recommend. We really should think about preparing our minds for approaching old age and death. See, it's not just about dying. It's also about the process of dying. Moving through old age and dying. Of course, some people do die when they're younger. When we were kids, we all wanted to die surfing. You know surfing? Surfing the waves in the ocean. We thought that would be a good way to go. Now when I look back, I think that's quite ridiculous. Dying from, it's like drowning, which is not a pleasant way to go. We can hope that we die in our sleep, but there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee when we're going to die or how we're going to die. But what we can do is prepare our minds for that eventuality. How can we stay calm and unmoved? The other thing that we have to take into consideration is that we may die in pain. Right? And some people are fortunate to pass away in their sleep without pain, but a lot of people experience quite a lot of infirmity, which is another thing, that we don't usually think about. Getting old, slowing down, not being able to do the things we want, but also being dependent because our body just falls apart, right? So we need to take all of these things into consideration. And what the Buddhists have in mind is to prepare through meditation to be able to handle every situation, no matter what it is. So the Buddhists have an antidote for every unpleasant emotion. And they, in meditation, try to lessen our greed, lessen our anger, lessen our discontent, right? In other words, to take it from the positive side, to learn detachment, to learn patience, to learn contentment, so that when we get older and when we face death, we can be more calm, peaceful, and accepting of our dying. The earlier we get used to the idea of dying, the easier it's going to be. Now here we've been talking about death in the first person, which is important because it concerns each one of us. But we can also imagine that the same kinds of questions arise when we consider the dying of others, our dear friends, our family members, our teachers, our students, right? But the same general principles apply. We'd also want to be prepared to keep a calm mind, even a happy mind, while our loved ones are going through the process of dying. That's very important because we want to be there for them. If we're freaking out when our parents are dying, it's going to make it harder for them. If we can be calm, attentive, right? Attentive, and full of love when our loved ones are passing away, it's going to make everything easier for us and easier for others. Are we okay up to here? Any questions so far? Okay, well then we can go on to the bioethical issues, and there are many, right? Generally I have a PowerPoint that introduces some of these ideas, but basically some of the bioethical issues that arise are the question of termination of life, and that can apply to, say, abortion, or it can apply to pulling the plug at the end of life. That means, now, when the Buddha was alive, there was no question about termination of life because people died naturally. They didn't have the technologies that we have today to keep people alive artificially. So there was never a question of unpulling the plug. They didn't even have electricity, right? People just got old, they got sick, they died. But nowadays, because we have all of these technologies, advanced medical care and so forth, then the question arises of if someone is already attached to these tubes to try to prolong life, then at what point is it ethical to unplug? So I can say that these technologies are very useful. 30 years ago I got bitten by a viper up in Himachal Pradesh and almost died. Right? So 3 months in the hospital, I did not know from day to day whether I would be alive tomorrow. And thanks to medical technology here at East West Medical Center in Delhi, I'm still kicking. So I'm very grateful. Very grateful. And even though it took a year to learn to use my arm again, now I'm completely functional. I was able to go back to school. Everything works quite well, and so forth. Which, by the way, is a great reminder that death can come at any time. Not necessarily when we're old. That's important to remember. These roads, let me tell you, yeah. And so I was kept alive artificially, thanks to medical technologies, and I'm very grateful. But at what point might it be not useful to keep someone alive if someone is in a comatose state? And I'm going to raise the questions. I'm not going to answer them all. We might want to just keep the question and think about it, right? Of course, for the Buddhists, the bottom line is not to take life. It comes sort of ahimsa, non-harm, but especially not to cut short a sentient being's lifetime. So the Buddhists are particularly concerned about sentient life. Sentient life would be life that has feeling, life that has consciousness. The Buddhists are not as concerned about cauliflowers and cabbages. They don't consider it non-virtuous to kill a carrot. But to kill a sentient being would be non-virtuous, unwholesome, and best avoided. Of course, in Buddhism, everything is a personal choice. We make our choices with the recognition that our actions have consequences. But the consequences of my actions ripen on me. The consequences of your actions ripen on you. So ultimately, all of us need to make our own decisions. And sometimes we have to make difficult decisions. But that would be the basic principle that the Buddhists are working from. And it's even enshrined in the first of the 5 precepts for lay people, not to take life. And the most serious of these is to take a human life. So, now that leads to the question of end-of-life care, and whether there might be a time when it would be the most compassionate thing, in assuming that the person requests to end their life. Is it virtuous or non-virtuous to help someone terminate their life? What do you think? Okay? Not okay? Say someone is very ill, terminally ill, and in great pain, and they ask you, oh, I just really want to end it. I've lived a good life, and now I just can't stand the pain anymore. Oh, please help me end my life. What do you do? What do you think?
Well, it's, I think, maybe practical to manage the pain and let the person exhaust all the suffering that is there in this birth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Pain management is actually very good now. It's much better than previously. They have medications that can help to manage the pain. And in fact, they say that in Holland, where terminating one's life is legal under certain circumstances, usually people make that decision not because of the pain. They make it because they feel useless, or they feel that they are a burden to others. So that's useful information, because from a Buddhist perspective then, if we know someone who is terminally ill and is suffering a great deal, we can give them more loving kindness. We can try to give them the care and attention that they need that might help them not to feel a burden, right? And not to feel the need to terminate their lives, right? So, any other perspectives on that one? Well, generally speaking, the Buddhists would recommend that we live out our natural lifespan. We all have come into this life with a certain lifespan, depending on our actions in the past, our karma. But then anything can happen anytime. You know, you can get hit by a truck, and you can walk out of the center this evening and get hit by a truck. I mean, I hope it won't happen, but it could happen, right? So we need to be prepared. Then another question that arises is about stem cell research. What do we do about this question? Because they find that through the use of stem cells, they can try to develop technologies, medical technologies, cancer and heart disease, diabetes, and so forth. But they need stem cells in order to do the research. Well, this was a real hot button issue in the States 10, 15 years ago. But now it turns out that you don't always need to use embryonic stem cells. You can also use adult stem cells. So it means that earlier they would use embryos to harvest. They say harvest the stem cells in order to do the research. But now more and more they've discovered that they can do almost the same research using adult stem cells, which means that we don't have to take the life of a sentient being. Again, the Buddhists are always going to come back to the question of taking the life of a sentient being. So, now where do they get these stem cells? Where do they get these embryos? Well, they get them from the in vitro fertilization clinics. So people want to have a baby, some couples can't have a baby, so they go to an IVF clinic and try to conceive artificially. So what they do then is to artificially inseminate a human egg and create embryos and implant them in the uterus. Now, to make sure that they get the result they are hoping for, a human baby, then they normally implant up to 8 embryos in the uterus, and then keep the ones that look healthiest and eliminate the ones that are weaker. So we wonder why people are having triplets, quadruplets, quintuplets, sextuplets, whatever, so many kids at one time. It's often because of the in vitro fertilization clinics. Now, not only are they implanting more than one embryo in the uterus of the woman, but they are also producing many fertilized ovums or embryos, and they put them in refrigeration in case the first one doesn't work out. Then they have more stored, up to 500 embryos per couple. Okay, now what happens to all of those embryos after a few years? They can't keep them forever, right? So eventually they throw them in the trash, in the dumpster. Oh, well, that's 500 potential human beings in the trash bin, right? So people have kind of overlooked this simple fact that in fact they're producing many more embryos than they need at the moment. So the Buddhists would always look back to the causes. The Buddha taught karma, cause and effect. All phenomena have a cause. And the cause for all of these multiple births are multiple embryos. And so we have to think about a solution that will address the problem by considering the cause of the problem. But then, having produced all of those embryos, why not use them for research? If they're just going to get thrown in the trash, why not use them for scientific research? So these are the questions that we face. And it became a very politically charged issue in the United States because we have, it's a very divided country. I'm American, by the way, and the United States is very divided. And this is one of the questions that divides people, is pro-life, pro-choice. So, in fact, a lot of federal funding, you're not allowed to do this kind of research. So the biotech corporations have to keep 2 laboratories, 2 completely separate laboratories. The ones that are federally funded cannot engage in any kind of research that takes the life of embryos. And anything that does work on human embryos has to be privately funded. So you can imagine how expensive this is. So these are some of the issues that arise. Now another issue that's come up is cloning. Cloning means to make a replicate or a duplicate of any given organism. I think the first one was Dalai the sheep. Remember Dalai the sheep? Where they cloned her in a petri dish in a chemical lab, right? Instead of the ordinary way that life reproduces. And so it was kind of for many people, at the University of Hawaii, they produced green mice because our university color was green, so they produced green mice in a lab, right? Then there was the case of a stray cat. They cloned a stray cat, and it cost $60,000 to clone her, and they named her Copycat. Yeah, and that raised a lot of questions about distributive justice or economic justice. When children are dying of hunger around the world, then why are we spending, and people are exterminating 6 million cats every year in the US alone, why would we spend $60,000 to clone a stray cat? Then, of course, the question about human cloning arises. And that's really scary to a lot of people. And then there's a film about where they cloned Hitler, for example. So these are among the issues that arise when we look at bioethical questions. And the questions are still open because the technologies continue to evolve. And the questions will get more and more complex. And they say that these issues are going to be among the most greatest concerns that humanity is going to face in the future. So it's good to start thinking about them and thinking about them from various points of view. Not the religions of the world have different answers, and it's really interesting to get together and to compare notes on how we might think about these complicated issues, right? So again, so on the abortion issue, Buddhists would normally recommend, not take of any living being, including an embryo. It came up at the time of the Buddha. So we look to the texts of that the Buddhists have, which sort of include the teachings of the Buddha, and to try to get some baseline sorts of ideas on how the Buddha might have addressed these questions. Now, of course, the Buddha said nothing about stem cell research because they didn't have those technologies at the time. So we have to sort of extrapolate from what we know. And first is not to take life. On the other hand, there are circumstances. That's easy for us who have many choices to maybe come to a conclusion on. But what about a mother who has 10 children? She has HIV/AIDS. Her husband just walked out the door. She has nothing to feed the 10 children that she has, and she finds herself pregnant. That's a very different question. She's in a very different situation than the privileged who write the books on these issues, right? So in those situations, the Buddhists normally, I conclude, would recommend pro-life, pro-choice. Ultimately, everyone has to make their decisions, and then we reap the results of our decisions. But we would also want to generate compassion for people who have to make these difficult decisions, not to be, I would say, judgmental on when thinking about, say, a woman who has to make such a difficult choice and she has to feed her family. So that's another thing too. The Buddhists would want to approach every situation with loving kindness and compassion. I've decided that no matter what the question is, the answer, love is the answer. So, but that's just my personal opinion. So, so I'd like to open up the discussion and see if anyone has any other questions or ideas about these matters. And please feel free to raise your ideas and we can discuss.
cases where a family has asked you to help them when their family member is very sick, dying in a great deal of pain, and they would rather just let that person go. They're not on life support, but they're in a great deal of pain, and the person themselves says, "I've had enough." How do you explain to people what traditional Buddhism feels about that? That better they suffer it now than have to go through it later?
That's a very good question. Okay, so did everyone hear the question? How do we deal with the situation if a family comes to us and has a family member who is not on life support, but is in great suffering, a great deal of pain, and is terminal, and the person himself or herself wishes to terminate his or her own life? Well, I think, of course, every situation is different because every human being is different, right? And we can't just make some sort of blanket prescription that would, one size fits all. No. It would depend on the age of the person, the economic circumstances of the person, the living situation, caregivers, access to care, and so forth. Generally speaking, I think that the Buddhists would recommend using the end of life for spiritual practice. After all, we're facing the end, and there are many practices that we can do at the end of life that will be very beneficial. I'll name just a few. One is meditation on impermanence, like we did as we started out this session, to actually get in touch with the impermanent nature of our body and our mind. And as we do more and more meditation, we get more closely in touch with the moment-to-moment fleeting nature of our own bodies and our own minds. Now, to gain insight into that is a great spiritual insight. The second would be to gain insight into suffering itself. This is another one of the issues that we try to avoid. Like death, we really don't want to think about suffering. But suffering, you remember, is the Buddha's first noble truth. To gain an understanding of suffering is really, really important. So here we are. We're suffering. So we can look at our own suffering and recognize it as a natural part of life. Not only am I suffering, but all sentient beings are suffering in various ways at different times. All life is not suffering. Some people, the Buddhists, all they talk about is suffering, and everything is suffering. Life is only suffering. No. Of course, we have lots of happiness and joy in life, as well as problems. So, but when we're suffering, what do we do? Well, I can say that actually meditation helped a great deal when I was in that situation with the snake bite. One technique is to actually look at the suffering directly. And this is where meditation is such a great help in preparing us to maintain focus and attention, close attention. They call it bare attentiveness to what's going on right now, right here, right now. Oh, I have a pain. Watch it. Don't push it away. They say that as we try to push it away, we make it worse because we tense up. But if we simply look at the pain, we'll find that it actually starts to break up and dissolve because it's impermanent. So as you meditate, so when we meditate, we often get pain in our knees, we get pain in our shoulders, and of course when we're watching a movie for 2 hours, we never get pain in our knees or pain in our shoulders. But the minute we try to meditate, we start to get pain in our knees, pain in our shoulders. Well, so what to do? Well, watch it. Watch it directly. It's very interesting. Yeah. And it will often just completely dissolve and go away. It will come back, of course, because it's impermanent. Do your own experience. Remember the Buddha said, don't accept anything I say until you have verified it through your own experience. Very valuable advice. Okay, so we can gain insight into impermanence, we can gain insight into suffering. We can also practice loving kindness. We can practice compassion. These are fantastic meditations. And when we think about our own suffering, we can generate compassion for ourselves, loving kindness for ourselves, and then we can also think about the suffering of others in the world. Hey, I'm not the only person dying. I'm not the only person in pain. There are millions of people right now who are in pain and dying. So generating loving kindness and compassion for them is so beneficial. Our hearts just melt. And somehow, even if we're in pain, we start to feel happy, we start to feel content. So that's a great practice. We can also do things like reading texts and chanting. So it doesn't matter what religion we subscribe to, and we're all going to die the same, no matter what label we wear, right? But we can read the texts of our traditions, and we can do prayers of our traditions, and we can say mantras. So in a way, it's a kind of diverting the mind from the pain to the mantra, the chanting. So the Buddhists love to say Om Mani Padme Hum. They chant Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Or in Taiwan, they like to chant the name of Amitabha Buddha. So they chant Namo Mito-pho, Namo Mito-pho, Namo Mito-pho, Namo Mito-pho, Namo Mito-pho, Namo Mito-pho. And they can go on for hours, and they do. They have chanting groups that come to the hospital, volunteers. Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, they're really into this. So they'll bring a team of volunteers to your bedside when you're ill or when you're dying, and they'll chant for you. So lovely. Yeah. So whatever your favorite chant might be, whatever your favorite scripture might be, if you're not capable of reading, you can ask your friend or your relative to read for you. It's a great practice too. Now the Tibetans have several other practices that they can do, but they require preparation. One of them is Powa. Powa is a practice of learning to combine all of the winds of the body, 72,000 winds of the body, and channel them into the right, left, and central psychic channels, and bring them up to the top of the head here. So you practice this in meditation. It's an advanced meditation practice. But you learn to do this. Collect them all, bring them into the right, left, and central psychic channels, and bring them up just to the top of the head here. Then, at the moment of death, you can eject your consciousness directly to the Pure Land. So if we don't get enlightened in this lifetime, and I hope we all do, but if we don't, we can hope for a rebirth in a Pure Land. Pure Land is said to be very easy to achieve perfect awakening because there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas giving teachings all the time. There are no distractions. You don't have to work. You just full time. You can practice. So everything goes much faster. So that's an important practice. And there's a number of other practices too that we can learn and we can do in preparation for dying. So these are some of the things. Many other possibilities too. And of course this depends on whether the person is open to it. If our parents are atheists, you don't want to, I don't know, in colloquial English we say lay a trip on them. You know, we don't want to, no deathbed conversions, please. It's a big issue around the world because there's certain groups that think that you have to be saved according to their definition of saved. And so they go into the hospitals and the prisons. And it's considered unethical conversions because the people are in a very vulnerable state. So we're not talking about that. In fact, we want to be very skillful in how we take care of those who are sick and ready to pass away. Try to reach them on whatever link with them in their own traditions. Like my mother was a Christian, so a very serious Christian, right? And so when she was dying, we would sing hymns, Christmas carols, say the Lord's Prayer. I was singing Amazing Grace. I think I had the Janis Joplin version, but that was okay. She seemed to enjoy it. And make them happy according to their belief system. We don't want to disrupt a person's belief system at the end of life. It's not fair. It's not kind. If they're a Hindu or they're a Muslim or they're a Christian or an atheist, we should respect that, I believe, right? Now, one good thing is that the meditation on breathing is something that everyone can do, and it's very calming. But of course, we need to try to practice it before we die. We can't wait until the end, right? We need to prepare now for our future. So, if we practice this breathing meditation, it's very simple. Breathing out, breathing in. You want to try it? Okay. 5 minutes. We have time? It's 7:48. Want to try?
Yes.
Okay. So I thought you would. Okay. So please sit comfortably again. Relax. Bring your attention to your breath. And simply watch it flow out and flow in. Don't try to make the breath longer or shorter, faster or slower. Simply observe the natural flow of your own breathing. Enjoy your breathing. When the mind wanders, no worries. Simply bring it back to your focus, the object of your meditation, the breathing. If you have difficulty concentrating, you can also try counting the breaths. To do this, we mentally assign a number to each out-breath. The in-breath will come naturally. So, starting from 1, and in, 2, and in. Count up to 10, and then start again from 1. Let's try a couple of rounds and see how far we get. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Any more questions? Yes.
In Buddhism, we give a lot of stress to compassion.
Yes.
But we don't give much importance to meat eating, because a lot of people, they eat meat, and we don't give much stress to that.
Well, as I mentioned, the Buddha left that to the individual. Personally, I think we should give more attention to vegetarian diet, because for many reasons. First of all, the suffering of the animal. Second, health issues. And also the environment. Because raising animals really messes up the environment. It's getting critical. But ultimately, we all have to make our own decisions. Personally, I hope more and more people will be vegetarian. But if you can't be vegetarian all at once, you can try eating less meat. And then, yeah, little by little, you'll just feel so much better. You want to be vegetarian, I think so. That's my opinion.
You talked about the fear of death, but what about the fear of illness? I mean, like I've seen people, like, because the information is so readily available, so I've seen people getting fearful of this disease. Like, for example, someone is having a chest pain, so it could be a gastric problem, and he might think that it is a heart attack. So, like, what about that? What are your viewpoint on that?
Well, from Buddhist perspective, we would question, what's the cause of fear? Ultimately, what are we afraid of? We're attached to ourselves, right? Fear comes out of attachment to the self, and a fear that we're not going to exist any longer. Now, there are rational fears and there are irrational fears. Like, if you're having chest pain, you might want to get it checked, because, I mean, it could be something serious. On the other hand, if we ran to the hospital every time we had a pain, we'd be in the doctor's office all the time. So, I think to get over fear, it's good to question the source, attachment to self, basically. Some people say that you can overcome fear by fasting for 1 day. Check it out. I mean, a total fast. Not barfy and stuff. I mean, like a total fast. It might work. So basically the same applies. Be aware of what's coming up. There are irrational fears where it's all about me, right? It's all about me, my pain, my health, it can become overwhelming and obsessive, right? But if we have a legitimate, symptoms, then we should definitely just check it out. Like the Dalai Lama often says, say the prayers and take the medicine. You had a question?
Yeah, I have a question because in response to the question that you, answer that you have really given for the preparation at the time of the death. Now, like saying prayer, reading the text. I mean, one way there's a unique karma flow of the person who is about to leave the world, and on the other hand, we are saying that recite, chant. How does it really help that person? Unless until there's a karmic connection already. Otherwise, I think it may be just...
Yes, okay, good. Well, it can help in two ways. One way is that it creates merit. Merit is a kind of spiritual power that comes from doing wholesome actions.
But that is a merit to the person who are doing the chanting.
Yes.
But we are saying or trying to help the person who is in a very difficult situation and who is almost thinking that he has to leave the world in a very, I won't say undesirable, but he feels that, he has to necessarily leave.
Mhm.
So in that case, doing a prayer and the reading the text, does it really?
Sometimes when you are in stress, you don't like any sound.
Well,
You want to be very calm and
Mhm.
quiet. So reciting mantras may be disturbing to the.
yes, fair enough. You know, that's why I say we have to judge the situation. If the person feels calm, and this is the second benefit. The first benefit is creating merit, which we can create even by hearing the sound of the sutras, for example, or hearing the sound of the mantras. We can create merit that way. But the second benefit is it often relaxes the mind of both the caregiver and the dying person. If it doesn't, then better to keep silent. Right? So we ask the person, would you like to hear some, I've got a tape of, chanting, would you like me to play it? Respond to the needs of the person. Yeah. But usually, a lot of people find it calming, both for the person who is dying and the people who are taking care of the person and the friends who come to visit. Instead of just people come in and they don't know what to do when someone is sick or dying. They feel uncomfortable. Sometimes they cry and carry on, or they make the person feel terrible. So, like they're a failure or something. But death is not a failure. That's the thing. Death is a natural part of life. So people come in and they look all serious and don't know what to say. But the best thing is just to act, natural, and try to keep a light mood so that the person doesn't feel like a failure for being sick or a failure for being ready to die. Now that raises another important issue, which is about advanced healthcare directive. How many people have an advanced healthcare directive? Oh, this is bad news. Okay. Everyone should have a legal document that expresses your wishes, what you would like to happen when you die.
The living will.
A living will is one way to phrase it. I mean, for example, if you get into a car crash and you lose all your legs and arms, what would you like them to do with your body? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to, what do you want to happen? It's good to put it in writing because it will make things much easier for your family. They may feel that they need to try to keep you alive at all costs, and the American medical system and a lot of Western medical systems are designed to keep you alive at all costs. But there may come a time when you're ready to just kick back and move on to the next whatever, the next life, right? And so it's good to put it in writing. It'll be a kindness to your family. Now, what does happen after death? That's the other question. And there are many different answers to that question. Even among Buddhists, there are those who believe that we take rebirth immediately after death. But of course it won't be rebirth, it will be reconception, right? So we don't get born immediately, we have to get conceived first and then spend 9 months or so in the womb. So in the Theravada tradition and in the Zen tradition, they believe that after we die, there's no space in between. We just go on to the next life. But in the Tibetan tradition, they believe that there is a kind of an intermediate and reconception. And it can last up to 49 days. For most ordinary people, it would last maybe 1 or 2 days. But for someone who has practiced meditation well, they may take their time in the intermediate state to find an appropriate rebirth. Now, in order to be able to choose one's rebirth, we need to become a bodhisattva. What's a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva is someone who has perfect renunciation, the perfect bodhicitta, or attitude of wishing to be perfectly awakened in order to liberate others from suffering, and direct insight into emptiness. That's what we were talking about, some of us were talking about earlier. So it's not so easy to get these three qualifications. If we do, then we can, oh yeah, there's a nice family, and I'll have time to practice, and I'll be able to be a monk or a nun, and I'll spend my life working toward enlightenment. You see, you want to be born in such a nice family. But most of us are not to that level of attainment as yet. Most Buddhists would want to work toward that. Learn to focus the mind, concentrate the mind, so we can have a good passing. Even if we're not a bodhisattva, we can have a calm, clear mind as we're going through this intermediate state. So they conceive that if you've practiced well, then you would every 7 days have a chance to take a rebirth. If it isn't appropriate one, you get another 7 days. So that's why you'll find in Buddhist cultures, every 7 days they'll have puja and try to gain merit on behalf of the deceased. But by 49 days, then you have to take a rebirth. And there are lots of stories about great beings who have stayed in meditation up to 49 days or even longer. There's the head Khenpo of Bhutan has been sitting in meditation for about 8 years now. The pulse has stopped, the breathing has stopped, but the heart area is still warm. He's still sitting there. And there was a monk, a Russian monk, up in Buryatia. They found, they somehow the body just never decomposed. For most of us, right? The body's going to decompose. Also, that's an important thing too. What do we do when someone dies? According to the Buddhists, we'd want to give them a few days to just rest, just be with the process, right? 3 days at least, if possible. Depends on the weather, right? But how do we know when the person's consciousness has passed on to the next life? Because the body begins to smell, begins to decompose. Then we know that the consciousness has left the body. Until that point, if possible, legally, we should try to just let them go through their process. And it's interesting to note that in many countries it is legal to allow a person to rest in state. In California, right, when Mama Yeshe passed away, they verified that it had three days. Because otherwise, if someone just dies and you throw them in the morgue and start, a lot of people do donate their organs. Well, that's one bioethical issue we didn't get time for, but opinions differ on that too. In theory, it would be a very compassionate thing to donate our organs. And you can even, in many states in the United States, you have it on your driver's license. So if you get in a crash and you're not going to make it, they'll know whether they can use your organs to save somebody else's life. And the Buddhists would think that's a very compassionate thing to do. However, there are questions about it too, because, well, if they want to chop out your heart, but you're still, consciousness still in and around the body, that could be destructive, right? Unless we have really strong compassion. And we can just be fine with letting them chop off our organs. So that's something to work for, yeah. So I guess we reached the end of our time, and Should we do
More dedication.
little dedication of merit? Yes, please. Okay, good. So whenever we engage in any kind of spiritual practice or do any good deeds, we want to feel extremely happy about it and rejoice in having done something good, like this evening spending an hour and a half listening to the Dharma, thinking about the Dharma, practicing the Dharma. It's something very good, something very wonderful, so we can feel very happy that we spent our time meaningfully. And then we want to share that merit with all living beings. So I'll say a short prayer. Of the merit that we have accumulated, may we achieve the state of perfect awakening in order to liberate all sentient beings from suffering, leaving not one behind.